Imagineering Story, Episode 4. Let's talk about it. So this episode dove into a lot of different subjects. Disney's Animal Kingdom, the Disney Cruise Lines, Tokyo Disney Sea. But because my channel is Orange Grove 55 and I focus mostly on Disneyland and California Adventure and the Anaheim parks, I wanted to focus this review on that California Adventure Westcott story, okay? And plus, to be honest with you, that was the more interesting part of the episode. Animal Kingdom, Disney Sea, Cruise Lines, those were all home runs almost immediately. That's boring. Let's talk about DCA. That's where all the drama is, right? So that's what I really wanted to touch upon in this episode. So it was very, very interesting. After Disneyland Paris, Michael Eisner was saying they really wanted to scale back the investments and the budgets for these, parks, right? So they were originally going to do a park called Westcott, which was going to be like an West Coast version of Epcot, and it was going to have like a world showcase, but it was going to be more based on the continents, so Africa, Asia, Europe, right? It sounded phenomenal. Every Disney fan that knows about Westcott, that's like the one thing we all wish Disney would have built, right? It just looks so cool from the concept art, and even the planning that went around it, like the new Disneyland Hotel and the people movers that were going to transport you around the resort. It just looks so cool. So cool. And they talked about that and how that was the original concept, for the second gate. And obviously I would have preferred that, but again, it's just concept art and everything looks really cool in concept art. I do think if they would have built Westcott, it would have been plagued kind of with the same issues that Epcot is seeing now, with a lot of IP being thrown in there. I'm certain that Westcott would have had some sort of New York area with Marvel and Iron Man, and the Europe area would have been thrown, would have had like every princess and fairy tale thrown in there. So in Asia would have had Mulan and Big Hero 6, right? It would have been a completely different park by now. But from the concept art, it really was awesome. But that didn't happen. And that didn't happen because, again, Michael Eisner got scared off because of Disneyland Paris. Okay, he wanted to scale back the investment. So they came up with this idea. Let's create a park, kind of like a world showcase, but just for California. And that's pretty much what DCA 1.0 was. It was a realistic version, kind of a Cliff Notes version of California. So it was very much trying to give you a taste of the state. The problem is that nothing is going to compete with the real thing. You can't build a lagoon and have it really actually compare to the real Pacific Ocean. You can't build a fake Golden Gate Bridge and have it compete with the real thing. And it just didn't work out, right? It just didn't work out. So it was kind of an ill-conceived concept, okay? And the park fell flat. It's said in the episode that it really did fall flat. Now, I do want to say one thing, though. Paul Pressler was the president of the Disneyland Resort at this time. And while I do believe he was the worst president Disneyland ever had, he definitely is the worst. I also feel like he's kind of unfairly given all the blame. Okay, like in this episode, they were talking about how, he was a retail guy. He didn't understand theme parks and yada, yada, yada. Yeah, and that's partly true. But at the same time, these guys, these executives don't have 100% autonomy. Okay, guys like Paul Pressler, they're in it to advance in the company. Okay, so he's going to do what he thinks his boss wants. So Michael Eisner was the one who really wanted to cut back costs and keep things really lean and trim. So Paul Pressler was just kind of following that. He was doing what his boss wanted him to do. Okay, now again, I'm not defending Paul Pressler. I think he was a terrible president for the resort, but he didn't have 100% autonomy, and he was trying to please Michael Eisner with all these cost-cutting measures. So I think fans need to keep that in mind a little bit when they're talking about Paul Pressler, because it wasn't all him. It really wasn't. A lot of this was Michael Eisner. and the mandate from Eisner to keep things cheap, right? And besides the fact, and then it's funny, they talked in this episode too, oh, he's from retail, he didn't get theme parks. Well, that doesn't really make sense either, because you know what? Tom Staggs was the chief financial officer of the Walt Disney Company, went on to become the Parks and Resorts head, and he did phenomenal. So what happened there? This guy was the head bean counter, went on to lead the parks and did a phenomenal job. So I don't believe this whole thing that like just because he came from retail, that's why he sucked. I don't know. That felt a little bit weird to me. But overall, it was really interesting to see how the mindset, the internal conversations of how California Adventure came about, and, California Adventure has always been of great interest to me. I love this park, and I love this park because I see the potential in it. DCA 2.0 was really like tip of the iceberg as to what this park could be. Okay, a lot of people complain about the California theme, and it's kind of like it hinders the potential, but it really doesn't. California is a vast theme. You can do a lot with it. Buena Vista Street's a perfect example of how you can take California and make it really whimsical and charming, right? So this park, because it opens so lackluster, I've always been more interested and more thirsty for the improvements and the additions for California Adventure than I have for Disneyland even. Disneyland's the A student, right? And California Adventure is like the C- student, right? Who's trying his hardest or her hardest to get that A. You're going to root for that underdog, that C- student when test time comes around. You want that C- student to get that A. You're rooting for them, right? The A student gets an A every time. It's boring, right? It's boring. So I've always been more interested in what comes to California Adventure for that reason. I see the potential. It has so much potential, and it's come a long way. But overall, I really enjoyed this episode. Like I said, I love California Adventure, and it was really interesting to see them deep dive into that creative process and mindset as to how the park came about. But what do you guys think about episode 4? What do you think about the California Adventure story? What do you think about all the drama, the California theme? What are all your thoughts on this? I would love to hear from you guys. Thank you all so much for watching. And as always, have an adventurous day.